Poor twin sisters ask for food outside a supermarket. The young billionaire approaches and asks, "Who takes care of you?" One of them answers, "She takes care of me, and I take care of her." But when he sees the earring she's wearing, he starts to cry. The aroma of spices lingered in the air as Thomas stepped into the traditional market of Riverbrook. He hadn't planned to stop there that Saturday morning. It was just a whim, a sudden change in his usual route. Later, he would consider that moment as the instant fate decided to intervene. Thomas Miller, the young billionaire who at 32 had revolutionized the tech market with his design software, adjusted his scarf against the fall wind. Despite his fortune, Thomas preferred to go unnoticed. He wore simple clothes and drove a discreet luxury car. Few people in the small town knew who he really was, and he liked it that way. He walked past vendors arranging fruit in perfect pyramids, wandering distractedly among the stalls. Even though he was one of the richest men in the country, Thomas felt a void that no financial success seemed able to fill. That was when he heard a child's voice, almost a whisper, coming from the narrow space between two stalls. "Please, sir, just a bit of bread." He turned around and saw two girls, no more than 8 years old. They were identical. Same almond-shaped eyes, same dark brown hair tied in messy ponytails. Their clothes were worn but clean, and they looked at him with a mixture of hope and caution. Thomas usually didn't stop. He wasn't the type to get involved. Since moving to that small town 3 years ago, running from the media and constant pressure from investors, he had built a routine free of complications. But something about those two identical girls captured his attention at once. "Who takes care of you?" Thomas asked, looking around for a responsible adult. The girls exchanged glances. The one who seemed more confident answered, placing her arm around her sister's shoulders, "She takes care of me, and I take care of her." The simplicity and strength of that reply hit Thomas in a way he hadn't expected. Something in those words revealed a story of struggle and survival that moved the young billionaire, who was used to seeing people beg for his money or influence. The girls looked at each other again. The quieter one lowered her head. "Our mom went to heaven," said the one who spoke, her voice firm despite the words. "It happened 2 weeks ago." Thomas felt a tightening in his chest. 2 children, orphaned, asking for food in a market. And there's no one taking care of you. No relatives, no neighbors. The girl shook her head in the negative. "There was an old lady in the building, but she said she couldn't do it anymore. She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Managing on our own." Thomas didn't know what to say. The situation was far more serious than he had initially imagined. "Come tea," he said, gesturing toward the market's bakery. "Let's buy something for you to eat." As they walked, Thomas noticed the girls kept a cautious distance. The one who had spoken first walked slightly ahead, while the other observed everything in silence. It was then that a beam of sunlight passed through the market awning, illuminating the face of the quieter girl. And then he saw it. In her right ear, shining softly, was a crescent moon-shaped earring with a small amber stone at its center, an earring he knew very well. Thomas stopped so abruptly that the girls almost ran into him. He felt a lump in his throat, and tears began to well in his eyes. "That earring," he began, his voice failing completely as the first tear rolled down his face. He tried to compose himself, but it was impossible. The young billionaire, always so controlled in business meetings and interviews, now wept silently before 2 unknown children in a market. The girl instinctively touched the earring, as if it were a talisman, looking confused at the man crying in front of her. "It was our mom's," the other explained, still acting as the protector. "She gave it to us before she went away. Lucy wears one, I wear the other." Thomas looked at her and saw the identical pair in her left ear. The set was split between the two, each one with half of a hole. "My name is Lily," continued the girl who spoke more, "and this is my sister, Lucy." Lucy, the quieter one, gave a small nod, her eyes never leaving Thomas. "What was your mother's name?" he asked, feeling his heart race. The girls exchanged glances again, that silent communication only twins seemed to share. "Clare," Lucy answered, speaking for the first time. Her voice was softer than her sister's, almost an echo. "Clare Miller." The name hit Thomas like a lightning bolt. Clare Miller. His sister Clare, whom he hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Clare, with whom he had grown up sharing secrets and dreams, until the day she decided to leave to pursue her art, against their parents' rigid will. Clare, to whom he had given a pair of crescent moon earrings on the eve of her departure. "So, you'll remember that even when you don't see me, we're still under the same sky," he had said. Thomas felt the world spinning around him. These girls, with the same almond-shaped eyes as his, wearing the earrings he had chosen so carefully. They were Clare's daughters. At the bakery, Thomas bought bread, some cheese, fruit, and chocolate. The girls watched everything with alert eyes, but without asking for anything specific. Then they found a nearby bench where they could eat. "You really have nowhere to go?" he asked, watching them eat with a controlled hunger, as if trying to make the food last. Lily swallowed a piece of bread before answering. "We were staying in our apartment, but the man who collects the rent said we had to leave. We took our things and..." She shrugged, as if that explained everything. "And where are you sleeping?" "At the shelter near the station," Lucy answered, surprising Thomas with her frankness. "But they only let you stay 2 nights. Today is our last one." Thomas took a deep breath. The idea of 2 children on the street, especially if they really were his nieces, was unbearable. "How have you managed on your own?" he asked, trying to understand the situation. Lily straightened her shoulders, a gesture that made her look older than her 8 years. "Our mum taught us to be strong," she said, with a simplicity that touched something deep inside the young billionaire. Lucy nodded, placing her hand over her sister's. Thomas took his wallet from his pocket and showed them an old photo. He and Clare, teenagers, arms linked, smiling at the camera. "This is my sister Clare," he said, pointing to the girl in the photo. "And I'm Thomas Miller." The girls studied the photo carefully. Lucy touched Clare's face in the picture with her fingertips. "That's Mom," she whispered, looking at her sister for confirmation. Lily nodded slowly. "Younger, but it's her," she agreed. Then she looked at Thomas, her eyes narrowing with a mix of hope and distrust. "Are you our mom's brother?" Thomas felt his throat tighten. "Yes," he managed to say, "that Clare was my sister." "Does that make you our uncle?" Lucy asked, her gentle voice carrying a weight of hope Thomas felt physically. "Yes," he replied, "that would make me your uncle." The girls looked at each other in that silent conversation they seemed to have. "Why didn't we ever meet you before?" Lily asked, as direct as ever. The question hit Thomas like a blow. Why, indeed? Why had Clare never told him about her daughters? Why had she never introduced them to him? "Your mother and I lost contact a long time ago," he explained, feeling the weight of each word. "There was a family disagreement. She left to follow her dream of becoming an artist. Our parents didn't take it well, and things got difficult. Mum was a painter," Lucy said, pride shining in her eyes. "She made beautiful paintings." "She succeeded then," Thomas murmured, more to himself. "She fulfilled her dream." "She painted in our home," Lily continued. "Sometimes she sold her paintings at the fair. Sometimes she gave lessons to other people." Thomas pictured Clare, her talent finally free to be expressed, even if in more modest conditions than she deserved. "Did she never talk about me?" he asked, unable to hide the pain in his voice. Lucy touched the earring on her ear. She said these earrings were special, that they were a gift from someone she loved very much and missed deeply. Thomas felt his eyes sting. Clare had remembered him all along. "Would you like to come with me?" he asked, the decision forming in his heart before his mind could fully process it. "To my house, I mean. I have plenty of room and you'd be safe there." The girls looked at each other again. "How do we know you're really our mom's brother?" Lily asked, as practical as ever. "Besides the photo." Thomas thought for a moment. "I can say Clare had a birthmark on her right wrist, shaped like a half-moon, and she always sang a particular song when she was nervous or worried." Lucy's eyes widened. "Dream a little dream," she whispered. "Mom used to sing it to us so we could sleep." Thomas nodded, feeling a wave of emotion. That was the same song their mother had sung to them when they were children. Clare had kept the tradition alive with her own daughters. "And the mark," Lily said slowly, "on her wrist. It looked like a small moon. There was enough certainty now. These girls were Clare's daughters, his nieces, family he hadn't even known he had. "So what do you think?" he asked again. "Would you like to come with me?" Lily looked at her sister, who gave a barely perceptible nod. "We'll go," she decided, "but if anything seems weird, we're leaving." Thomas couldn't help but smile at her determination. "Deal," he said. "Do you have anything to pick up at the shelter?" "Our backpack," Lucy replied. "Everything's in there. One single backpack for 2 children." Thomas felt his heart ache. On the way to the shelter, a simple yet well-kept building, the girls ran inside and came back minutes later with a worn-out backpack and a small plastic bag. "That's all we have," Lily explained as they got into the car. Driving his discreet yet luxurious Audi, Thomas watched the girls in the rearview mirror. Lucy had fallen asleep, her head on Lily's shoulder. Lily remained alert, watching him carefully. "Is your house far?" she asked. "Not really," Thomas answered. "About 15 minutes from here. It's in a secluded area, with plenty of space and extra rooms for you two." Lily nodded, satisfied with the information. "Why did Mom never talk about you?" she asked abruptly. Thomas sighed. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "Maybe she tried to protect you. The separation was hard on all of us." "Sometimes Mom would cry looking at a box of memories," Lily said. "Lucy and I looked once. There were old photos, letters, and a child's bracelet. The friendship bracelet Thomas had made for Clare when they were 10. He still had the one she'd made for him, stored in his own memory box. She missed you," Lily continued. "We knew." Thomas felt the lump in his throat tighten. So many lost years, so many words unspoken. And now Clare was gone forever, but not entirely. Part of her lived on in these 2 girls, with their determined eyes and the pair of crescent moon earrings divided between them. When they arrived at Thomas's property, an elegant yet understated mansion, hidden behind a tall gate and a tree-lined driveway, Lily's eyes widened in surprise. She gently woke her sister. "We're here, Lou. Uncle Thomas's house." The word uncle sounded both strange and natural to Thomas. He had never imagined he would be an uncle, much less like this, so suddenly. As he guided the girls inside, passing the marble entryway and the impressive foyer, Thomas realized his orderly, predictable billionaire life had just changed completely. Yet instead of panic, he felt a strange sense of peace. Somehow the crescent moon earrings he had given his sister as a symbol of connection had fulfilled their purpose, even after so many years of silence. Clare might be gone, but part of her had returned to him through these 2 little girls. And Thomas knew, with a certainty that came from the depths of his soul, that he had to protect them at all costs. Thomas watched the girls from across the living room. They were asleep on the large sofa, wrapped in soft blankets he had found in the guest closet. Lucy and Lily, 2 small versions of Clare, with her almond-shaped eyes and that determined look his sister had always worn. Night had fallen, bringing with it a strange silence in the mansion that usually felt too large for just one person. Now, with the girls there, the space took on a different purpose. Thomas poured himself a whiskey and sat in the armchair by the fireplace. The flames danced, casting shadows on the walls, as his mind wandered to the past, to a summer day 10 years ago. "You can't just throw everything away for some adolescent dream." His father's voice still echoed in his memory, loud and unyielding, as always. Clare stood in the living room with her suitcase ready. Her eyes, the same eyes Thomas now saw in his nieces, shone with a mix of fear and resolve. "It's not an adolescent dream, Dad. It's who I am." Thomas remembered standing in the corner, watching everything, wanting to intervene but trapped between loyalty to his sister and respect for his father. It was always like that, Clare challenging, him mediating. "For who are you?" their mother asked, sitting stiffly on the couch. "A rebel who'd rather paint than have a secure future." "Art is my future." Clare's voice never wavered. She never wavered when it came to defending her passion. Their father took out his wallet and threw some dollars on the table. "If that's what you want, go. But don't come back asking for help when your dream falls apart." Thomas felt his throat tighten at the memory. His father had always believed money was the solution to everything, that success was measured by bank accounts and real estate. Ironically, Thomas had become exactly the type of man his father admired: rich, powerful, successful, and deeply lonely. That night, Claire left, after a tight hug with Thomas and a whispered promise, "I'll show you it's possible to live off what you love." That same night, before she departed, Thomas had given her the crescent moon earrings, a farewell gift, a reminder that no matter the distance, they still shared the same sky. And now, those same earrings had brought her daughters to him. Thomas looked again at the sleeping girls. Lily, even in sleep, kept her arm protectively around her sister. Lucy, for her part, seemed completely relaxed, as if she sensed she was safe under her twins' guard. Claire's daughters. The idea was still difficult to process. Thomas tried to recall what happened after his sister left. The first weeks were tense. No one mentioned Claire's name at the dinner table. It was as if she had never existed. His mother removed Claire's photos from the walls, packed away her remaining belongings in boxes that went to the attic. Thomas had tried to keep in touch. He called the number Claire had left, but after a few months it was no longer in service. He sent letters to the address he had, but many came back undelivered. Over time, the silence grew into an ever higher wall between them, and then came Thomas's own departure. The sudden success of his design software, the meteoric growth of his company, the fortune that accumulated faster than he could track. He remembered trying to find Claire when he made his first million. He wanted to share the news, to show he had somehow managed to combine material success with creativity, something their parents never believed possible. But Claire had disappeared. Or maybe, he thought bitterly now, he hadn't looked hard enough. Lucy stirred in her sleep, murmuring something inaudible. The sound brought Thomas back to the present. He got up and moved closer to the sofa, adjusting the blanket that had slipped. That was when he noticed the small pendant Lucy wore around her neck, partly hidden under her shirt. Thomas leaned in slightly to get a better look. It was a miniature paintbrush made of silver. "An artist like her mother," he whispered, feeling another rush of emotion. Thomas returned to his armchair and picked up his phone. He opened the folder of old photos and found what he was looking for, a photo of him and Claire as teenagers, painting together in their parents' backyard. She had always been the most gifted, but Thomas had his own knack for drawing. It was that skill that eventually led him to develop the software that revolutionized graphic design. And if they really are her daughters, the question echoed relentlessly. The evidence was there, the earrings, the physical resemblance, the name. But there was something else, something about how Lily protected Lucy, how they seemed to communicate without words. It was the same connection he and Claire had shared. Thomas tried doing the math. The girls said they were 8 years old. Claire had left nearly 10 years ago. She could have been pregnant when she left, or maybe she'd met someone soon after. And why had she never told her brother about the girls? So many unanswered questions. A soft sound made Thomas glance back at the sofa again. Lily had woken up and was watching him with those keen eyes of hers, the same eyes as Claire. "Is everything okay?" Thomas asked quietly, so as not to wake Lucy. Lily nodded. "I'm just checking," she said, sounding far too mature for her 8 years. "Making sure we're safe." "You are safe," Thomas assured her. "I promise." Lily studied him for a moment. "You look sad." The observation caught Thomas by surprise. He was so used to hiding his emotions in the corporate world that he'd forgotten how perceptive children could be. "I'm thinking about your mom," he admitted. "My sister." Lily seemed to consider this. She got sad sometimes too, looking at old photos. Thomas felt his heart constrict. "Did she talk about me?" "Not much," Lily said with the direct honesty of a child. "But she kept your stuff. And those earrings, she said they were special." Lily yawned and snuggled back against her sister. Within minutes, she was asleep again. Thomas stayed awake, watching the two girls fate had brought into his life. In less than 24 hours, his solitary billionaire's existence had been utterly transformed by these two children. Two children he increasingly believed to be Claire's daughters. Two children who were now his responsibility. Thomas looked at the photo on his phone again, at Claire's smiling teenage face. "What do you want me to do, Claire?" he murmured. "How can I make up for our years of silence?" Of course, there was no answer. But as Thomas looked again at Lucy and Lily, He knew exactly what Clare would expect of him. They were the second chance he never thought he'd have. The next morning brought a new challenge for Thomas. The girls needed clothes, school materials, and most importantly, a legal arrangement. After serving an improvised breakfast, toast, jam, and chocolate milk, which the girls drank with an eagerness that tugged at his heart, Thomas made a few calls. "I'll need to go out for a few hours," he said, while Lucy was drawing at the kitchen table with some pencils and paper he had found. "Will you be okay on your own?" Lily frowned. "We're coming with you." Thomas hesitated. "I have to sort out a few things. It might be boring for you." "We're not staying," Lily said firmly. "We don't know this place well." Her protective instinct impressed Thomas. It was sensible, after all. They had just met him, and trust would be built gradually. "All right," he agreed, realizing he also wasn't comfortable leaving them alone so soon. "Go get ready. We have a few stops to make." While the girls got dressed in the same clothes they'd worn the day before, Thomas made a mental note that buying new clothes would be the first stop. He typed Margo and the approximate address the girls had mentioned into his phone. He needed answers, and she seemed like the best chance to get them. After some searching, he found a likely match. Margo Lenoir, 72, living in a blue house near the river, just as the girls had described. The database his personal assistant had access to showed the property registered in her name for over 30 years. As he drove with the twins in the back seat, Thomas thought about what he would say. How would he explain who he was? How would he ask about Clare without seeming invasive? "Where are we going?" Lucy asked, looking out the window of the Audi. "We're going to buy some things for you," Thomas replied. "Then, I thought we could visit the house where you used to live." The girls fell silent for a moment. "We can't go back there," Lily finally said. "The man who collected the rent locked everything up." "We're not going back to live there," Thomas clarified. "I just want to see the place and maybe talk to some neighbors. Perhaps Mrs. Margo." Lucy's face lit up noticeably. "Margo? She has a big orange cat. She makes ginger cookies." Thomas smiled. "She sounds nice." "She is," Lily confirmed. "She took care of Mom when she got really sick, and then she took care of us for a while, until—" Her voice trailed off, and Thomas didn't press. There would be time for all the answers. After a quick stop at a department store, where Thomas bought clothes, shoes, and other essentials for the girls, they drove to the neighborhood near the river. It was a modest part of town, with older but well-maintained houses, the kind of place where everyone knew each other by name. "It's there," Lucy pointed as they turned onto a street. "The blue house with the flowers." Thomas parked in front of a small two-story house, painted a light shade of blue. Window boxes overflowed with colorful geraniums, and the tiny front yard, although simple, was well cared for. "Wait here for a minute," Thomas told them. The girls nodded, more at ease now that they were in familiar territory. He walked up to the door and knocked. Seconds later, he heard footsteps approaching. The door opened, revealing an elderly woman with gray hair tied back in a loose bun. Her eyes, framed by expression lines, were a vivid blue, and she assessed Thomas with a mix of curiosity and caution. "May I help you?" she asked. Thomas cleared his throat, feeling oddly nervous. "My name is Thomas Miller. I believe you knew my sister, Clare." The woman's eyes widened slightly and then flicked toward the parked car, where the girls were watching from the window. "Thomas," she repeated, as if testing the name. "Clare spoke of you." Something stirred in Thomas's chest at those words. Clare had spoken of him. "May I come in for a moment? I have some questions, and the girls are with me." Margo hesitated only briefly before nodding and opening the door wider. "Sure. Bring the girls too. I just finished baking a cake." Thomas motioned to Lucy and Lily, who hopped out of the car and ran to the door. Upon seeing Margo, their faces lit up. "Margo!" Lucy exclaimed, hugging the older woman around the waist. "Hello, my dears," Margo replied, stroking the girl's hair. "I see you've found your uncle." Thomas looked at Margo, surprised. "So you knew who I was?" Margo gestured for them to come inside. "Let's talk in here." Margo's house was small but cozy. Every surface seemed to tell a story, well cared for antique furniture, shelves filled with well-worn books and photos in wooden frames. On one of the living room walls, Thomas immediately noticed several small paintings he instantly recognized as Clare's work. Her style was unmistakable, vibrant colors that somehow conveyed a profound sense of calm. "Girls, why don't you go see if Rufus is in the backyard?" Margo suggested. "He's missed you." The twins didn't need another invitation. They ran toward a door in the back, leaving Thomas and Margo alone. "Rufus is the cat," Margo explained, indicating that Thomas should sit on the sofa. "A lazy old thing, but great with kids." Thomas sat down, feeling the weight of the past 24 hours. "How did you know who I was?" he asked again. Margo sighed and settled into an armchair facing him. "Clare had a photo of you. She kept it in a special box along with other mementos. When her illness got worse, she showed me the picture and said that if anything happened to her, I should try to find you." "And why didn't you?" The question came out more accusatory than Thomas intended. Margo didn't seem offended. "I tried. I called the last number Clare had, but it was disconnected. I looked your name up online, but there were so many Thomas Millers. And then..." She hesitated. "Things got complicated after Clare passed. The girls were taken into temporary foster care while I tried to get provisional custody. When I finally got them back, I discovered someone had thrown out Clare's belongings from the apartment. The box with the photo and your contact was gone." Thomas felt a wave of remorse. If he had searched more diligently for Clare over the years, maybe he could have found her before it was too late. What happened to her? To Clare? Margo folded her hands in her lap, as if trying to contain her own grief. Leukemia. Diagnosed 2 years ago. At first, she responded well to treatment, but... She shook her head. In the last few months, it got worse rapidly. Clare was worried about the girls, of course. They were all she thought about. Thomas closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process it. Clare had died of leukemia. His sister, always so full of life, so determined, claimed by a disease that devoured from within. "She could have come to me," he said, more to himself than to Margo. "I would have helped. I have resources. I could have paid for the best treatments." "She knew," Margo said softly. "In her last months, she found out about your success online. She was very proud of you, you know." Thomas felt his eyes burn. Then why didn't she reach out? Pride, maybe. Or fear of rejection. Or she just didn't want you to see her that way, weakened by illness. Margo shrugged. "Clare was complex, like all of us." A loud meow preceded the entrance of a huge orange cat into the living room, followed by the twins. Thomas used the moment to compose himself. "Rufus is hungry," Lucy announced, petting the cat. "He's always hungry," Margo remarked with a smile. "Why don't you take him to the kitchen? There's food in the usual cupboard." Once the girls left again, Margo stood and went to an old desk in the corner of the room. She opened a drawer and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "Clare left this for you," she said, handing the envelope to Thomas. "She asked me to give it to you if you ever showed up." Thomas took the envelope with slightly trembling hands. His name was written on the front in the slanted, artistic handwriting he would recognize anywhere. "When did she write this?" "A few days before she went to the hospital for the last time," Margo replied. She knew she wouldn't be coming back home. Thomas carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a simple, handmade card painted with a crescent moon in shades of gold and dark blue. He opened it. "Thomas, if you're reading this, it means my girls have found their way to you just as I always knew they would. The earrings, remember? You said they'd keep us connected, no matter the distance. That earring will lead my daughters back to my brother. Even if I can't return, the moon will know the way home. There's so much I wanted to say, so much I should have said years ago. But days pass, and then years, and the silence becomes harder to break with each moment. Lucy and Lily mean everything to me. I've given them what I could, love, art, music, stories, but now my time is running out, and I need to give them what only you can, a secure future, a real chance in life. I know it's a lot to ask after all this time, but you were always the kindest person I knew. Forgive me for not being brave enough to reach out sooner. Pride is a prison we build for ourselves. With love always, Clare." Thomas let the letter fall into his lap as tears finally escaped. He didn't mind that Margo saw him cry. "She lived well, you know," Margo said after a moment. "Simply, but with purpose. She taught art to kids at the local library, sold her paintings at the fair on Sundays. The apartment was small, but always filled with color, music, books. The girls grew up surrounded by beauty." Thomas nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "How was she at the end?" he finally asked. "At peace," Margo answered. "Worried about the girls, of course, but at peace with herself. Her biggest anguish was leaving them, not dying." Thomas picked up the letter again, rereading his sister's words. "She trusted I would find them. Claire always said you two had a special connection. Even as kids, you always found her, no matter where she hid in your games." That memory made Thomas smile through his tears. It was true. When they played hide and seek, he always knew where Claire was, as if he could feel her presence. "She knew me better than I knew myself," he murmured. The sound of the girls laughing in the kitchen brought Thomas back to the present. He carefully placed the letter in its envelope. "What happened after Claire, after she was gone?" he asked. "You mentioned social services." Margo sighed. "I tried to keep them. Claire had left documents naming me as their guardian, but bureaucracy is tough. My age counted against me, as did my limited income. The girls ended up in a temporary home for 2 weeks. Then I managed to get them back while the case was under review." Thomas took a deep breath, thinking of the girls, separated so soon after losing their mother. "And then what?" "I had a small stroke 3 days ago," Margo explained, a slight tremor in her hand revealing the recent ordeal. "Nothing major, but I was hospitalized overnight. When I came back, the girls were gone. I was terrified. I was about to call the police today." Thomas pictured the girls at the market, begging for food. They had likely run off, afraid they'd be separated again or sent to an orphanage. "They're safe now," he assured Margo, "and I'll make sure they stay that way." "You're going to keep them?" The hope in Margo's voice was evident. "Yes," Thomas confirmed. "They're my sister's children, my family." Margo smiled, and Thomas saw relief in her eyes. Claire would be happy. That was what she wanted deep down. The girls came back into the living room then, Lucy with Rufus in her arms. "Can we take Rufus to your house, Uncle Thomas?" she asked hopefully. Thomas looked at Margo, who laughed softly. "Rufus is a stray cat I took in. He comes and goes as he pleases. I suspect he'd find his way to your house if the girls are there." Thomas smiled. "I think we can find room for a cat." The smile that lit up Lucy's face was worth any inconvenience the cat might cause in his orderly life. "Come look at Mum's paintings," Lily said, tugging Thomas's hand toward the wall where Claire's work was displayed. Thomas studied each piece carefully. There were landscapes, abstract portraits, and the one that touched him most, a small painting of 2 girls holding hands under a crescent moon. "That's us," Lily explained proudly. "Mum said the moon protects us." "Like our earrings," Lucy added, touching the small moon in her ear. Thomas felt something unexpected rise within him, not just pain or guilt, but a renewed sense of purpose. These girls were a part of Clare, a living legacy of his sister's talent, who had left too soon. "You can take some of her paintings," Margo offered, coming closer. "Claire would want the girls to have her work around them." "Thank you," Thomas replied. "It would mean a lot." As they selected some paintings to take, Margo told Thomas more about Claire's last years, how she taught art at the community library, how she saved every cent so the girls could have music lessons, how she turned the simplest days into adventures, filled with stories and creative games. "She was an amazing mother," Margo said. "The girls were the center of her universe." "Would she have wanted me to take them?" Thomas asked, a lingering flicker of insecurity showing. "It's what she most wished for in the end," Margo assured him. "She found some news about your success online and was so proud, Thomas. She always said you were the smartest in the family." Thomas shook his head. "Claire was the artist, the real talent. Both of you had gifts," Margo commented. "You just went down different paths." As the girls helped Margo pack some of Claire's paintings, Thomas looked around the house, the simple, welcoming home where his sister had found some comfort in her final years. How different everything might have been if they'd stayed in touch. If he'd known his nieces since they were babies, if Claire had shared her illness with him in time, guilt was a familiar weight. But now there was something else, a chance for redemption through her daughters. Thomas glanced at the girls, so small and vulnerable, yet carrying that same determination Claire had. "You can visit any time," Margo said as they were leaving, with paintings and some of Claire's belongings carefully placed in the car trunk. "My door is always open to you." "Thank you for taking care of them," Thomas said, gratitude overflowing in his voice. "And for taking care of Claire." Margo smiled, her eyes moist. "It was an honor. Claire brightened my life, just like these girls. Take good care of them, Thomas." "I will," he promised, and he had never been so certain of anything in his life. On the way back, with Lucy and Lily humming in the back seat, Thomas kept one hand in his pocket, where Claire's note rested. The moon had found its way home, just as Claire had predicted. Now it was up to him to ensure her daughters had the safe and loving home they deserved. The guilt over lost time was still there, but alongside it grew hope, the chance to do things differently, to honor Claire's memory by being the uncle her daughters should have had from the start, a second chance he wouldn't waste. Thomas looked at the email on his phone for the third time, as if the words might change with each reading, but there they were, clear and definitive. "Mr. Miller, the DNA test results confirm a first-degree blood relationship between you and the two minors, Lucy and Lily Miller. The probability of avuncular relationship, uncle-niece, is above 99.9%. Full results are attached to this email. 3 days had passed since the visit to Margo's house. Thomas had used his connections to expedite the DNA test, not because he doubted the girls were Claire's daughters, but because he knew he would need concrete proof to formalize custody. Sitting in his office, with the mansion unusually noisy from Lucy and Lily playing upstairs, Thomas felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't just the confirmation of what he already knew in his heart. It was the scientific validation that these girls were indeed part of him, part of Claire. "Sir," came the voice of Mrs. Patterson, the housekeeper he had hastily hired to help with the girls. "They're asking if they can have dinner on the porch tonight. Something about watching the stars." Thomas smiled. In just a few days, the twins had completely transformed the house routine. "Sure, why not? Tell them I'll be up in a few minutes. I have something important to discuss." When Mrs. Patterson left, Thomas looked at Claire's photo on his desk, one of those they had brought back from Margo's. In it, Claire was smiling, arms around her daughters when they were younger, maybe 4 or 5. "You'd be proud of them," he murmured to his sister's image. "They're amazing, Claire, just like you." Thomas put the phone in his pocket and headed upstairs. The mansion that once felt empty and cold now bustled with life. Drawings taped to the fridge, tiny shoes scattered in the hallway, laughter echoing through once silent rooms. He found the girls in the room they had chosen, the largest guest room, featuring a big window overlooking the backyard. Thomas had repainted the walls a soft blue and bought 2 matching beds, though the girls insisted on sleeping together in the same bed most nights. Lucy was drawing on the floor, colored pencils spread around her. Lily was leafing through a photography book she found in the house library. "Hey," Thomas said, knocking lightly on the open door. "Can I come in?" They both looked up simultaneously, a mirrored motion that still fascinated him. "Uncle Thomas!" Lucy exclaimed, jumping to her feet. "Look what I drew." She showed him a colorful drawing of 3 figures holding hands under a starry sky. Thomas recognized himself and the girls immediately. "That's beautiful, Lucy," he said sincerely, admiring the obvious talent she had inherited from her mother. "Can we really have dinner outside?" Lily asked, ever practical. "Mrs. Patterson said she needed to confirm with you." "Of course," Thomas answered, sitting on the edge of one of the beds. "Actually, I thought all 3 of us could eat out there. I have some news to share with you." The girls exchanged looks, that silent communication they seemed so good at. "Is it good news or bad news?" Lily asked, worry evident in her voice. Thomas smiled to reassure her. "Good news. Very good, actually." Half an hour later, the 3 of them were seated on the large porch that wrapped around part of the mansion. Dinner, pasta with tomato sauce and the girls' favorite, was served on a rustic wooden table Thomas rarely used before they arrived. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lucy pointed excitedly at the horizon. "Look, Lily. The colors look like one of Mum's sunset paintings." Thomas noticed how even in the simplest moments, Claire's memory was present. He took a deep breath, knowing it was the right time for the conversation he had planned. "Girls," he began after they finished eating, "do you remember the day we met when I told you about the earrings I gave your mum?" They both nodded, instinctively touching the crescent moon earrings they wore. "I knew from that very moment you were my sister's children. I could see it in your eyes, in your mannerisms. But in order for us to stay together officially, I needed proof that other people would believe." "Like evidence?" Lily asked, always attentive. "Exactly," Thomas confirmed. "That's why we did that test, remember? When a nurse came here and collected some saliva from each of us." "It was funny," Lucy commented. "The swab tickled." Thomas smiled. "Well, I got the results today." He paused, looking at the girls' expectant faces. Even though they were so young, they seemed to understand the importance of this moment. "The DNA test confirms what we already knew. You are my nieces, the daughters of my sister Claire. We're family, officially." Lucy smiled immediately, but Lily kept a serious expression, processing the information. "What does that mean?" she asked. "Are we going to stay with you forever?" Thomas felt the weight of that simple question, forever. These girls needed stability, certainty. "Yes," he replied with conviction. "I'm going to seek legal custody. I'll be responsible for you. This will be your home permanently." Lucy stood and walked to Thomas and stopping beside him. "So you really are our uncle, not just because you knew Mom?" "I'm your real uncle," he confirmed. "Your Mom's brother. And now that we have this proof, nobody can separate us." Lily finally relaxed her shoulders, an almost imperceptible gesture of relief. "So we don't have to be afraid anymore?" she asked, sounding younger than Thomas was used to, reminding him that despite her forced maturity, Lily was still just a child. Thomas stood up and knelt in front of them so he could look them in the eyes. "You're safe with me now," he promised, his voice both firm and gentle. "I'll take care of you, protect you. And together, we'll remember your mom every day." Lily was the first to move, stepping forward and wrapping her small arms around Thomas's neck. Lucy joined at once, and the three of them stayed like that, locked in a silent embrace while the sun's last rays disappeared on the horizon. In that moment, Thomas felt something forming, a bond that went beyond DNA, beyond scientific proof or legal documents. It was a commitment sealed in the quiet of that hug. In Lucy's tears, she didn't try to hide, in the way Lily allowed herself, for the first time, to appear truly vulnerable. When they finally pulled apart, Thomas saw that the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Look," Lucy said, pointing upward, "the moon is rising." And there it was, a crescent moon, softly glowing in the night sky, like the earrings connecting the girls to their mother, and now to their uncle. "Mom said the moon always finds us, no matter where we are," Lily commented, her voice lighter now. "She was right," Thomas agreed, gazing at the sky. "Some connections are too strong to break, even when people are far apart." "Like the three of us now?" Lucy asked. Thomas smiled, feeling a certainty he hadn't felt in years. "Exactly like the three of us." Later, after putting the girls to bed, Lucy insisting on just one more story, Lily double-checking the windows were fully closed, Thomas went back to the porch alone. The crescent moon was high in the sky, bathing the garden in its silver glow. He took out Claire's letter, which he now carried with him everywhere, and reread the line that touched him most. "That earring will lead my daughters back to my brother. Even if I can't return, the moon will know the way home." Claire had been right. The girls had found their way to him, guided by those crescent moon earrings, by a connection that transcended time and distance. The DNA test had merely confirmed what his heart knew from the moment he saw Lucy and Lily in the market. They were part of Claire, part of him, his family. And for the first time in many years, Thomas felt he was exactly where he belonged. Thomas had been rummaging through the attic boxes for nearly an hour. Dust danced in the beams of sunlight coming through the small window, making him sneeze occasionally. He knew it was there somewhere, the photo album he'd brought when he moved to the mansion. Back then, he hadn't been able to part with the memories, even with all the hurt from the family rift. "Got it," he muttered, pulling out a cardboard box with the word personal handwritten on the side. He carefully descended the attic stairs with the box and took it to his office. The girls were out in the yard with Mrs. Patterson, enjoying the sunny afternoon. Through the window, Thomas could see them running across the grass, chasing soap bubbles the housekeeper blew. It was surprising how, in just 2 weeks, his life had changed completely. The mansion that once felt like a mausoleum now pulsed with life. The silent corridors now echoed with hurried footsteps and laughter. And he himself, Thomas Miller, the reserved billionaire who lived for work, now found himself shutting down his computer early to help with homework, or simply to sit in the garden and listen to Lucy's fantastical stories. He sat at his desk and opened the box. On top, he found what he was looking for, a brown leather photo album, worn at the edges. He hadn't opened it in years, but now he had a purpose. Slowly, he turned the pages, looking at moments frozen in time. Thomas and Clare as kids, playing on the beach. The two as teenagers in front of their school. Clare at her high school graduation, bright and full of hopes. Thomas paused at the last photo, him and Clare in their parents' backyard, weeks before she left. She was smiling, her eyes full of that determination he now recognized in his nieces. Thomas carefully removed that photo from the album. This was the one he wanted to show the girls. He placed it in a simple silver frame he kept empty on his desk, almost as if he had unconsciously always been waiting for a special picture to fill it. Later, after dinner, while the girls were getting ready for their baths, Thomas took the framed photo to their room. "I have something to show you," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed where Lucy, already in pajamas, was brushing her hair. Lily, always more organized, was neatly folding her clothes before putting them in the laundry basket. Both looked at the object in Thomas's hands with curiosity. "What is it?" Lucy asked, coming closer. "An old photo," Thomas replied, "from before you were born." He turned the frame around so they could see. They both leaned in, their eyes fixed on the image. For a moment, no one spoke. "That's you," Lily finally said, pointing at the younger Thomas in the photo. "And that other person is—" Lucy tilted her head, as if deciphering a puzzle. "It's Mom," Lily whispered, her voice almost trembling. "It looks like our Mom, but younger." Lucy took the frame from Thomas, studying the photo more closely. "She's smiling the same way she smiled at us," she observed, running her small fingers over Claire's face in the picture. Thomas felt a lump in his throat. It was the first time they were truly making the connection between the mother they knew and the teenager who had been Thomas's sister, as if two separate worlds were finally merging into one. "When was this photo taken?" Lily asked, always interested in details. "Right before your mum left home to follow her dream of being an artist," Thomas explained. "She had just turned 19. Mum told us she left home very young," Lucy said. "She said it was scary at first, but worth it because she could paint whatever she wanted. She mentioned you sometimes," Lily added, looking directly at Thomas. "She said she had a brother who drew better than anyone else in school." Thomas laughed, surprised. "I did draw, yes, not as well as Claire, but I managed. That's how I started developing my company's design software, actually." "Do you still draw?" Lucy asked, suddenly intrigued. "Not as much as before," Thomas admitted. "But I still know how." "Will you draw with us tomorrow?" she asked, eyes shining with anticipation. Thomas smiled. "Sure. We can draw after breakfast." As he tucked them into bed that night, Thomas noticed the framed photo now had a place of honor on the bedside table between their two beds. "So we can remember Mum was a kid once, too," Lily explained, following Thomas's gaze. "And that you two were friends." "Best friends," Thomas said softly. "Your mom was my best friend." In the days that followed, Thomas discovered a new routine forming. Mornings began earlier than he was used to, usually with Lucy tiptoeing into his room, followed by Lily whispering, "I said we should wait for him to wake up." Breakfasts became moments of lively conversation. Thomas learned the girls loved pancakes, especially when he drew smiley faces with maple syrup, a talent he hadn't known he possessed, until Lucy challenged him to make a cat-shaped pancake. Mornings were usually dedicated to studying, Thomas had hired a private tutor while sorting out the paperwork to enroll them in school next semester. Afternoons were more relaxed, drawing on the porch while exploring the garden, or swimming lessons in the property's pool, which the girls adored. During those calm afternoons, Thomas really began to know his nieces. Lucy was outgoing, imaginative, always crafting elaborate stories about astronaut princesses or dragons who set up libraries. Her drawings burst with color and unconventional shapes, and her laughter was contagious. Lily, on the other hand, observed more than she spoke. Her drawings were meticulous, detailed, often realistic depictions of things around her. She loved reading and showed a surprising natural talent for math that impressed the tutor. And although she was quieter, Thomas noticed a subtle sense of humor that surfaced at unexpected moments. "Mom said we're like the sun and the moon," Lucy remarked one afternoon while they painted on the big table outside. "I'm the sun because I talk a lot, and Lily is the moon because she keeps secrets." Lily rolled her eyes but smiled. "Mom said each of us had a bit of both sun and moon, just in different amounts." Thomas, who was attempting to draw a horse at Lucy's request, looked at his nieces with admiration. Claire had done an amazing job raising these two very different yet deeply connected girls. "Your mom was very wise," he said. "She was clever," Lucy agreed. "She knew how to cook dinner with almost nothing when money was tight. And made up games so we wouldn't notice how cold it was when the heater broke," Lily added. That was how, through casual comments during daily activities, Thomas began to piece together the life Claire had led with her daughters. It hadn't been easy, that much was clear. There were financially hard times, days without proper heating, unpaid bills, but there was also plenty of creativity, love, and valuable lessons. Evenings brought a new ritual, card or board games after dinner, followed by bedtime stories. Thomas discovered he was an excellent storyteller, something he hadn't known until seeing how intently the girls listened to his improvised tales. "Mom always read to us every night," Lily said once, when Thomas closed the book they'd been reading. "Even when she was so tired from teaching all day. Sometimes she'd fall asleep in the middle of the story," Lucy laughed. "We had to wake her up." "She worked a lot?" Thomas asked, seizing the opportunity to learn more about Claire's life. "Yes," Lily answered. "She taught art at the library and at 2 schools, and sold paintings on weekends at the fair. And she painted murals on the walls of people's houses," Lucy added. "She called them murals." "She was talented," Thomas said. "That's what people said," Lily agreed. "But they didn't pay much. Mum said being an artist meant choosing between fame and food, and she'd rather we ate." The straightforward way Lily described those hardships made Thomas's heart ache. He imagined Claire struggling to support her daughters while he was accumulating millions, the contrast painful to contemplate. But the girls didn't just share stories of difficult times. They spoke of surprise picnics Claire organized on sunny days, painting sessions on old bed sheets in the apartment courtyard, nights dancing in the living room with the music turned all the way up. "Mom said being poor in money doesn't mean being poor in happiness," Lucy said one night, as Thomas tucked her into bed. "She made us laugh even when she was worried about bills." As days turned into weeks, Thomas noticed changes not just in the girls, who seemed more secure and relaxed, but in himself. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely present, connected, part of something larger than his work or his fortune. Without realizing it, Thomas began to laugh more. Once rare, his laughter now echoed through the house, mingling with the girls' giggles. His sleep, once restless and often aided by medication, grew deeper and more restful. The migraines that plagued him for years subsided. One morning, while making pancakes with the girls, Thomas caught himself humming. Lily looked at him in surprise. "Are you sing like Mom did?" she observed. "She sang that song too." Thomas paused, spatula in the air. It was "Dream a Little Dream," the same song his mother used to sing to him and Claire as kids, the same one Lucy had mentioned that Claire sang for them. "It was her favorite," he said, feeling a surge of emotion. "Our mom sang it to us when we were little." "Our grandma?" Lucy asked, eyes wide at the thought of more family. Thomas nodded, realizing he hadn't yet talked about the girl's grandparents. That was a conversation for another time, he decided. For now, he wanted to savor this unexpected connection through music, Days took on a comfortable rhythm. Thomas reorganized his work schedule, delegating more tasks and attending fewer meetings so he could be present for the girls. His personal assistant seemed surprised by the change, but Thomas found he could be just as efficient in fewer hours when he had a strong motivation to finish work and get home. Home. The word had taken on a new meaning. The mansion that was once just a place to sleep between work marathons now felt alive. The girls' drawings decorated the fridge, pinned by colorful magnets. Toys appeared in the most unexpected places. Meals were moments of conversation and laughter, not just a biological necessity squeezed between checking emails. One night, about a month after the girls arrived, Thomas found them in his office, looking at the framed photo he now kept on his desk, the same one he had shown them weeks ago. "Looking for something?" he asked. Lucy shook her head. "Just looking. It's strange to think you and Mom were kids once, like us." "Every adult was a kid once," Thomas replied, coming closer. "Even the serious and boring ones." "You're not boring," Lucy said quickly. "You're just busy sometimes." Thomas smiled, touched by her defense. "Mom said you were funny when you were a kid," Lily added, still looking at the photo. "You used to imitate the teachers and make her laugh until her stomach hurt." "Really?" Thomas was genuinely surprised. "She remembered that," Lily nodded. "She told a lot of stories about you two on her birthday. She said it was her way of keeping good memories alive." That night, after the girls fell asleep, Thomas sat on the porch, looking at the stars. He thought about Clare, the stories she had shared with her daughters, the effort she made to keep the good memories of them alive, despite everything. And he realized that through the girls, Clare had found a way to reconnect them, to bring back the Thomas he used to be, the boy who imitated teachers and drew comic strips, the brother who protected his sister from bullies at school, the teen who dreamed of creating beautiful, useful things. Without the pressures from their parents, without the weight of social expectations, without the armor he'd built around himself over the years, Thomas finally felt something he had forgotten: lightness. The word hit him like a revelation. Lightness. That was what Clare had always possessed, even in difficult times, a capacity to find joy in small things, to turn the ordinary into something special. That was what she had taught her daughters, and that was what, without realizing it, they were now teaching him. Thomas looked at the brightly lit house behind him, not just a mansion anymore, but a home. A home built not by the millions he'd spent purchasing and decorating, but by the sound of small footsteps running through hallways, the smell of pancakes in the mornings, the bedtime stories, the laughter shared over card games, the colorful drawings on the fridge. A home made by three people learning to be a family. Thomas's lawyer's office had that typical solemn air of legal environments: dark wood, leather-bound books, the subtle smell of paper and ink. Robert Geller, a man in his 50s with graying hair and thin-framed glasses, was sorting documents on the desk, while Thomas waited anxiously. "The custody papers are almost done," Robert said, adjusting his glasses. "The DNA test confirms kinship. We have statements from Miss Lenoir and the social worker who visited your home last week. Everything is in order." Thomas felt a momentary surge of relief. In the past 6 weeks, the girls had become the center of his life. The idea of finalizing custody reassured him. It was confirmation that Lucy and Lily would remain with him. "How much longer?" he asked, leaning forward in his chair. "Normally, we'd have a hearing before a judge in about 2 more weeks, Robert replied, but his tone suggested there was more. "However," Thomas's stomach dropped. He knew that "however" too well. "However," he prompted, bracing himself. Robert sighed, removing his glasses and setting them on the desk. "We've received a contest. A man named Eric Donovan filed a formal claim alleging he's the girl's biological father and is seeking custody." Thomas felt the blood run cold in his veins. The name wasn't entirely unfamiliar. Margo had mentioned it briefly, but it hadn't seemed like a real threat at the time. "What do we know about him?" Thomas asked, keeping his voice as steady as possible. Robert opened a different folder. "My investigators did a preliminary background check. Eric Donovan, 38, freelance musician. History of unstable employment. Some police run-ins disturbing the peace. 2 domestic violence charges that were dropped before trial, a few citations for public intoxication. He paused. Not exactly Father of the Year material. But can he challenge my custody? Thomas asked, concern evident. Legally, yes. If it's proven he's the biological father, he has rights. But given his record and the fact he apparently never participated in the girl's upbringing, we have strong arguments against him. Thomas ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. He's never cared about them. Why now? Robert gave him a knowing look. You're a wealthy man, Thomas. And you haven't been exactly discreet about wanting to leave a significant portion of your estate to your nieces. The implication was clear. It wasn't about the girls, but rather the money that might come with them. What are our next steps? Thomas asked, shifting into the problem-solving mode that had made him successful in business. We'll request a preliminary hearing as soon as possible. In the meantime, the girls stay with you under temporary guardianship. It would help if we had more information about this man's relationship with Clare and the children. Witnesses, documents, anything that confirms what we suspect. He was an absent father and potentially abusive. Thomas nodded, his mind already sorting possibilities. Margo would be a key witness. Perhaps neighbors from Clare's old apartment could attest to something. And the girls, he asked, will they have to testify? Possibly. Since they're old enough to express their preferences, the judge may want to hear from them, though usually that happens in a private setting, not open court. The idea of Lucy and Lily having to face a court, even under protected conditions, made Thomas feel an even stronger protective instinct. I'll do whatever it takes, he said, standing up. This man is not taking them. And that night, upon returning home, Thomas tried to keep things normal. The girls didn't need to know about this threat yet, he thought, not until it was absolutely necessary. But children are perceptive, especially those like Lucy and Lily, who had learned early on to read adult moods to navigate uncertain waters. You're acting different, Lily observed during dinner, her keen eyes studying Thomas's face. Just tired, he replied, forcing a smile. Long day. Lucy, who was drawing something in ketchup on her burger, looked up. You're worried. Your forehead gets a line when you're worried. Thomas let out a genuine laugh of surprise. Are you detectives now? Mom always said we should pay attention to details, Lily explained. People say more with their faces than with their mouths. The mention of Clare brought Thomas back to the reality of the situation. Maybe it was better to address it than leave them imagining worse possibilities. After dinner, as they sat in the living room watching a movie, Thomas paused the TV. The girls turned to him, curious. I need to tell you something, he began. It's about the custody process, so you can officially live with me forever. Is there a problem? Lily asked immediately, her intuition as sharp as ever. Thomas took a deep breath. There's a complication. A man has filed a claim, saying he's your father and wants custody. The effect was immediate. Lucy went pale, eyes wide with pure panic. Lily's expression hardened, her small fists clenching at her sides. Eric, Lily said, practically spitting the name out. Thomas nodded, surprised she knew the name. So, you do know him? Lucy scooted closer to Lily on the couch, as if seeking protection. Lily was the one who answered, her voice deeper than Thomas had ever heard. Mom always said he was bad. We were scared of him. That's why she ran away. Thomas felt a surge of anger at those words. The image of Clare fleeing with 2 little kids to protect them from a violent man was almost too much to bear. Did he hurt you? Thomas asked, trying to keep his voice calm despite the fury rising inside him. Lucy shook her head. He yelled a lot, broke things. Mom told us to go to our room and lock the door. But he never stayed long, Lily added. He'd show up, yell, ask for money, then leave again. When was the last time you saw him? Thomas asked, trying to establish a timeline. The girls exchanged glances as if calculating. I was 6, Lucy said. It was on my birthday. He showed up drunk and smashed my cake. The simplicity with which she recounted that cruelty made Thomas's heart clench. After that, we moved to a different town, Lily continued. Mom said it was to keep us away from him. Thomas nodded, processing the information. So Clare had been running. It wasn't just poverty that kept her from reaching out. She was afraid. "He never cared about us," Lily went on, her voice steady despite the obvious turmoil. "We want to stay with our uncle." "And you will," Thomas assured them, kneeling down so he could meet their eyes. "I'll do everything I can to make sure of it, but you need to know there might be some tough steps. You might have to talk to a judge and tell them about him." Lucy bit her lip, clearly frightened by the idea. "Will he be there?" "Not in the same room as you," Thomas reassured her, "and I'll be close by the whole time." "We don't want to go with him," Lucy said, her voice trembling. "He doesn't really like us." Thomas opened his arms, and the two girls immediately fell into his embrace. They stayed like that for a while, a united trio against an outside threat. "I love you both," Thomas said, surprised at how easily the words came out. "And I'll protect you, I promise." When they finally pulled away, Lucy had tears in her eyes, but Lily seemed to have found a new resolve. "We have to tell Margo," she said. "She knows what he's like. She can help." Thomas nodded, impressed by the girl's presence of mind. "I've already spoken to her. Margo is going to testify on our behalf." That night, Thomas let the girls sleep in his room. They fell asleep curled around each other on his large bed while he stayed awake in a nearby armchair, watching them and thinking. Eric Donovan's threat loomed like a shadow over the happiness they had built in the past few weeks. But there was something about the girls' reaction, their trust in him, their certainty he would protect them, that strengthened Thomas's determination. They had chosen him as their family, and he would not let them down. The following days were filled with meetings with lawyers, social workers, and private investigators. Thomas was determined to gather every piece of evidence against Eric Donovan while still trying to keep life as normal as possible for the girls. Mornings still involved pancakes and drawing. Afternoons still had swimming lessons and games in the garden. Evenings still brought stories and cuddles. But there was a new urgency in every moment they spent together, as if Thomas wanted to ensure they built enough memories to weather any storm that might come. A week after the revelation about Eric, Thomas found Lucy sitting alone on the porch, drawing with unusual intensity. "What are you doing, little one?" he asked, sitting beside her. Lucy showed him the picture, 3 figures holding hands in front of a large house. "It's us," she explained, "in our house forever." Thomas felt a lump in his throat. "That's a beautiful drawing." "Uncle Thomas," Lucy said, looking at him with a seriousness far beyond her 8 years. "So you won't let him take us away, right?" "Never," Thomas promised, putting an arm around her shoulders. "You're my family now." Lucy nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. "If you're Mom's brother, then you belong to us now too." The simplicity and depth of that statement struck Thomas like a wave. In Lucy's eyes, the bond was obvious and unbreakable. He belonged to them just as much as they belonged to him. Later that day, while helping Lily with her math homework, he noticed her watching him with that thoughtful expression, indicating she was considering something important. "What is it?" Thomas asked. "You got sad when you found out about Eric," she observed. "Not just because of the process, but because you thought we might be taken away." Thomas smiled, again impressed by her insight. "Yes, I did. The thought of losing you two really scares me." Lily nodded, as if confirming something to herself. "Mom used to say family is who takes care of us, not just who shares our blood." She was right, Thomas agreed. "As always." "Thank you for finding us," Lily said softly. "Now we have a home." Thomas felt his eyes sting with unshed tears. It was amazing how these 2 small children could express such great truths with such simplicity. As the legal proceedings advanced, life at the mansion took on a new rhythm. There were tense moments, especially when Thomas got calls from his lawyer within earshot of the girls. But there was also a new depth in their bond. The girls began sharing more openly about their memories, both good and bad. Thomas learned about the times Eric showed up unannounced, demanding money, yelling at Clare, scaring the daughters. He learned how Clare always placed herself between the girls and any potential danger, how she taught Lily to call the police if things escalated. "But Mom was clever," Lucy said one night, as the 3 sipped hot chocolate on the porch, gazing at the stars. She always found a way to make him leave. Each revelation only strengthened Thomas's resolve to protect them. At the same time, every day they spent together, drawing, laughing, creating new memories, strengthened the bond they shared. The court process would be lengthy. There would be testimonies, evaluations, psychological assessments. The shadow of Eric Donovan hovered over them as a constant threat. But inside the mansion that had now become truly a home, something greater than fear was growing. A routine built on genuine affection, a sense of belonging that transcended legal documents or biological ties, a family that had found its way back to each other despite all odds. And as Thomas watched the girls sleeping that night, he made a silent promise to Clare, to the girls and to himself. No shadow from the past would be strong enough to undo what they had built together. 3 weeks after the court's decision, Thomas stood in what used to be his secondary office, supervising the removal of the last few pieces of furniture. The room was large, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden, but it had rarely been used over the years, just to store files or occasionally host a client who preferred a less formal space than the main office. "Yes, take everything to storage," he instructed the workers carrying out the shelves and desks. "Except for that big wooden table, leave it." When the last mover left, Thomas was alone in the empty space. He stepped across the wooden floor, feeling its solidity beneath his feet. Natural light poured in, creating patterns on the floor. It was perfect. The idea had come to him a few days ago, when he found Lucy drawing on the hallway floor because, according to her, "I need more space to draw the whole forest." Thomas realized the girls needed a proper space for their creativity, something like what Clare had always dreamed of having. "Surprise," he announced that evening, guiding Lucy and Lily down the hall with their eyes covered. "You can look now." The girls removed their blindfolds and looked around, initially confused by the nearly empty space. "This is your smaller office," Lily noted, frowning. "But all the stuff is gone," Thomas smiled. "It's not an office anymore. Starting today, it's your art studio." The twins' eyes went wide in simultaneous realization. "A studio? Just for us?" Lucy asked, incredulous. "Just for the three of us," Thomas corrected. "I figured we could create together. It's been a long time since I've truly drawn or painted." Lily slowly turned in a circle, examining the space with her analytical gaze. "It's almost like the studio Mom used to say she'd have someday." Thomas felt a pang in his chest. "That's what inspired me. Your mom always wanted a place like this." In the days that followed, the room underwent a transformation. Thomas hired people to install shelves, cork panels on the walls, and special lighting to mimic natural daylight on cloudy days. Together, they chose paints, brushes, canvases, papers, clay, fabrics, and an endless array of other materials. "We've never had so many things to create with," Lucy said, as they organized supplies. "Mom always saved up to buy materials, but could never buy a lot." "Now you have everything you need," Thomas said, "and you can try anything you want." On the first official afternoon in the new studio, Thomas surprised himself with how excited he was. It had been years since he picked up a brush or pencil just to create something without a commercial purpose. His artistic talents had been channeled into developing design software, but the simple pleasure of mixing colors and applying them freely had long been left behind. "Let's paint the wall," Lucy suggested, pointing to a large white panel Thomas had installed on one wall. "We can do a giant mural." "What do you want to paint?" Thomas asked, already preparing trays of paint. "Our world," Lily answered, with that contemplative seriousness that sometimes made Thomas forget she was only 8, and so they began. Lucy tackled the lower part of the wall with vibrant colors, green for grass, blue for a lake, flowers of every hue. Lily worked more methodically, creating a detailed sky with realistic clouds and flocks of birds. Thomas, in the middle, connected the two worlds with mountains and trees, following the occasional instructions from the girls. "We need a house in the painting," Lucy said, pointing at an empty space. "A big house for all of us." Thomas drew the outline of a house, not a mansion like they lived in, but a cozy 2-story home with a large backyard, the sort of home you'd see in a child's drawing about family. "And people," Lucy insisted. The three of us. Lily, who usually preferred landscapes to people, agreed. And Mom, too. In the sky. Thomas felt another surge of emotion as he added 4 figures to the painting, 3 on the ground, in front of the house, and a 4th in the sky, blended with the clouds, smiling down at them. They worked all afternoon, lost in the creative process. When they finally stepped back to admire their work, they were all covered in paint. On their faces, arms, clothes. "This is the best mural in the world," Lucy declared, jumping with excitement. Thomas gazed at their collective creation and felt a kind of fulfillment he'd never experienced before. It wasn't perfect or refined, nor something that would impress art critics, but it contained something none of his professional achievements ever had: pure joy in the act of creating, without thinking about results or profit. Over the following days, the studio became the heart of the house. Mornings were still for lessons, and Thomas still worked a few hours in his main office, but afternoons in the studio were sacred. Some days they painted, some days they worked with clay, and others they made intricate collages with materials gathered from the garden. Soon, the art began to overflow from the studio into the rest of the house. A mobile Lucy made was hung in the entry hall. A ceramic vase Lily crafted, surprisingly symmetrical for a child her age, found its place on the dining table. Smaller paintings were framed and placed in the corridors. The mansion, once decorated with pieces chosen by professional designers, now found its personality through these imperfect but meaningful objects. "Your home looks different," Robert Palm, the lawyer, commented during a visit to finalize some documents. "More alive," Thomas smiled, glancing at the colorful collage the girls had made just for his main office. "It's not just a house anymore. It's a home." In the evenings, the smell of paint, clay, and glue lingered in the air, mingling with the aroma of dinner and the melodies of the music they played. A new tradition Lucy insisted on. Food with music tastes better. Thomas noticed that the mansion, once silent and orderly, now lived in constant creation and change, just like the three of them. One particularly inspired afternoon, while Lily drew a detailed imaginary map and Lucy tried finger painting, Thomas found himself looking at his nieces with a sensation he couldn't immediately name. It was only later, as they washed their paint-covered hands in the large studio sink, that he understood what he felt: pride. Not the pride he had felt closing big deals or watching his company's stock value climb, but something deeper and more meaningful. For the first time in his adult life, Thomas felt he had built something with his own hands and with his heart. Not a tech empire or a fortune, but a home where creativity, joy, and love thrived freely, like well-cared-for plants under the sun. A house that smelled of paint was his greatest masterpiece. Family court had a solemn air that morning. Thomas adjusted his tie for the 3rd time in 10 minutes, seated in the waiting area with Lucy and Lily. The girls wore simple but neat dresses, their hair in identical braids done by Mrs. Patterson earlier that morning. "It's going to be fine," Robert Cheese, the lawyer, said, sitting beside them. "We've done all we can." Thomas nodded, but his heart was pounding. The last few weeks had been an emotional roller coaster, with testimonies, psychological evaluations, background checks on Eric Donovan. But none of it mattered more than what would happen today: the final hearing to decide who would keep the girls. "Remember," Thomas said, turning to his nieces, "you just need to tell the truth. Say what you really feel." Lucy, holding Lily's hand tightly, nodded. "We know, Uncle Thomas." Lily, always the more observant, scanned the environment with cautious eyes. "Do we have to see him?" "He'll be in the room," Robert explained gently. "But you don't have to look at him if you don't want to. You can look at the judge, or me, or your uncle." Before they could continue, the door opened and a court officer appeared. "Miller and Donovan, the judge is ready to see you." Thomas took a deep breath, standing up and straightening his suit jacket. "Let's go." The hearing room was smaller and less intimidating than Thomas had imagined, designed for family cases rather than the dramatic jury setup seen in movies. Even so, when he walked in and saw Eric Donovan on the other side with his lawyer, he felt a surge of anger he had to actively suppress. The man claiming to be the girl's father had dark, unkempt hair and a scruffy beard. He wore a suit that looked borrowed, too large for his thin frame. When he saw the girls enter, he tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Thomas noticed Lucy squeeze Lily's hand tighter, and he placed a reassuring hand on their backs as they took their seats. Judge Peterson, a man around 60 with white hair and a kind but firm expression, surveyed the room before speaking. This hearing will determine the custody of the minors Lucy and Lily Miller. We have two petitioners, Mr. Thomas Miller, the children's maternal uncle who currently has temporary custody, and Mr. Eric Donovan, who claims to be the biological father. He looked at the documents before him. Let's begin with the attorney's arguments. The next 20 minutes were filled with legal statements. Thomas's lawyer highlighted the stable environment Thomas provided, the bond he had formed with his nieces, the excellent home visit reports. Eric's lawyer, on the other hand, focused on the natural right of the alleged father, promising that his client had changed and was ready to take responsibility. Thomas watched the judge, trying to read his expressions as he occasionally took notes. Sometimes the judge glanced at the girl, who sat quietly, holding hands. "I'd like to hear from Mr. Thomas Miller," the judge finally said. "Mr. Miller, please tell us why you believe you should have custody of your nieces." Thomas stood up, adjusting his tie nervously. He had prepared a speech with his lawyer, listing all the practical and legal reasons. But looking at Lucy and Lily, all of that felt insufficient. "Your Honor," he began, "I could talk about my financial stability, the large home I have, the great schools in my neighborhood." He paused. "But the truth is simpler than that. These girls are my sister Claire's daughters, whom I loved all my life. When she passed away, I didn't know they existed. If I had, I would have been there from day one." Thomas felt his voice tighten with emotion, but he pressed on. "Over the last few months, I've learned what truly matters in life, not the businesses I've built or the money I've made. It's waking up to make these girls pancakes. It's listening to their stories at bedtime. It's seeing them safe, happy, loved." He looked directly at the judge. "My sister trusted that I would find them and care for them, not out of obligation, but out of love. And that's what I've done, and what I want to do for the rest of my life." The judge nodded, revealing no particular reaction, then turned to Eric. "Mr. Donovan, the same question for you." Eric stood, nervously running his hands through his hair. "Look, I know I messed up before," he said, his voice rough. "But they're my kids, right? I have a right. Now I'm clean. I have a job. I can take care of them." It's what Claire would have wanted. Thomas noticed the judge's expression harden slightly at the mention of Claire's name. "Mr. Donovan, you have a record of domestic violence and public intoxication. Testimonies, including from Ms. Lenoir, indicate you appeared sporadically in the girls' lives, often causing disturbances. How do you explain that?" Eric looked uncomfortable. "Those were tough times. I'm different now." The judge regarded him for a few moments before saying, "I'd like to speak with the girls now. Given their ages and the nature of this case, we'll do it right here, but I ask everyone to remain silent while they talk." Thomas's stomach clenched. This was what he had feared most, the girls having to speak in front of Eric. But when he looked at them, he saw determination in their young faces. "Lucy and Lily," the judge said kindly, "could you come a bit closer? I'd like to talk to you." The twins stood, still holding hands, and took a few steps forward. "Do you know why we're all here today?" asked the judge. "To decide if we stay with Uncle Thomas or go with Eric," Lily answered, her voice surprisingly steady. The judge gave a slight smile. "Exactly. What can you tell me about Mr. Donovan? Do you know him well?" Lucy glanced quickly at Eric before looking back at the judge. "He was always drunk, yelling at Mom. She cried a lot. We're scared of him," she said quietly but clearly enough for everyone to hear. Thomas felt his heart ache at the simplicity of those words, which carried so much weight. "And what about your uncle?" the judge asked. "What's it like living with him?" Lily's eyes shone as she answered, "He really takes care of us. He cooks for us, helps with homework, tells us stories. His house became our home too." "And what do you want?" the judge asked, looking directly at them. "If you could choose, who would you like to stay with?" "We want to stay with Uncle Thomas," they answered almost in unison, without hesitation. Thomas felt tears forming, and he didn't try to hide them. On the other side of the room, Eric looked furious, murmuring something to his lawyer. The judge thanked the girls and who returned to their seats. After a brief moment reviewing his notes, he looked up. "I've heard testimonies, read reports, and analyzed the evidence. In custody cases, the child's well-being must prevail over any other factor, including biological ties." He paused. "Mr. Donovan, your history of abandonment and problematic behavior does not inspire confidence. Mr. Miller, on the other hand, has demonstrated commitment, stability, and a loving home for his nieces." Thomas held his breath, heart racing. "Therefore, it is this court's decision to grant permanent custody of Lucy and Lily Miller to Mr. Thomas Miller, with visitation rights for Mr. Donovan to be considered at a future date should he demonstrate significant improvements in behavior and stability." The sound of the gavel echoed through the room, sealing the decision. Thomas felt as if a massive weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Lucy and Lily threw themselves into his arms, and the three of them hugged tightly while Eric stormed out in anger. "It's over," Thomas whispered, kissing the tops of the girls' heads. "It's over. You're home now. For good." Thomas drove in silence, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror at the back seat, where Lucy and Lily sat. The girls wore identical dresses chosen especially for the occasion, and their hair was neatly braided, an elaborate style Mrs. Patterson had done that morning. "Are you okay?" he asked, noticing the unusual quiet, especially from Lucy. "Will they like us?" she asked, voicing the concern Thomas suspected they both felt. Thomas took a deep breath. How could he explain to two 8-year-olds the complexities of family relationships? How could he make them understand that the grandparents they were about to meet were the same ones who had once cut ties with their mother? "They're going to love you," he said sincerely. "They might be a bit nervous at first, just like you are, but everything will be fine." Deciding to introduce the girls to his parents hadn't been easy. Thomas had reached out to them after the custody hearing, a brief, emotionally charged call in which he'd informed them about the existence of the granddaughters they never knew and about Clare's death, which they also hadn't known. The silence on the other end of the line was followed by muffled sobs from his mother. Now, 2 months later, they were on their way to the house where Thomas and Clare had grown up, the house Clare left and never returned to. The property was about 3 hours from the city, a large, traditional home in a quiet suburb. When Thomas parked in the driveway, he saw his parents waiting on the porch, his father, Howard, now with snow-white hair and thinner than Thomas remembered, his mother, Evelyn, hands fidgeting, twisting a handkerchief between her fingers. "We're here," he announced, trying to keep his voice upbeat. "Ready to meet your grandparents?" The girls looked at each other, that silent communication that always fascinated him, and nodded in unison. The walk from the car to the porch felt like it took ages. Thomas felt the weight of the girls' small hands in his, one on each side. When they finally climbed the porch steps, time seemed to stop. Evelyn took a step forward, her eyes fixed on the twins, one hand covering her mouth. Howard remained still, but Thomas noticed the tremor in his jaw, the effort to maintain composure. "Mom, Dad," Thomas said, his voice hoarser than he intended. "These are Lucy and Lily, your granddaughters." Evelyn knelt slowly so she was at the girls' eye level. Her gaze studied their faces intensely, as though searching for and finding familiar traits. "You have her eyes," she finally said, her voice choked with emotion. Clare's eyes. It was as if a dam broke. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face, and she held out her arms tentatively. Lucy, ever impulsive, was the first to accept the embrace, followed by Lily more cautiously. "I'm sorry," Evelyn whispered, hugging her granddaughters for the first time. "We failed, Clare, but we won't fail you." Thomas felt his throat tighten as he watched his mother finally voicing the regret she had carried for years. He looked at his father, who now approached, his face etched with conflicting emotions. "They're beautiful," Howard said, his voice rough, extending a hand to lightly touch Lucy's hair. "Welcome to the family, girls." The initial tension dissolved over lunch, which Evelyn had prepared with great care. The twins, initially reserved, slowly opened up, especially when their grandmother showed them old photos of Thomas and Claire as kids. "Mom wore braids like ours," Lucy exclaimed, pointing to a picture of Claire at about 7 years old. "She loved braids," Evelyn confirmed, running her fingers over the album page, "and she loved when I tied colored ribbons at the ends." "Will you do that in our hair one day?" Lily asked, surprising Thomas with the spontaneity of her request. Evelyn's smile lit her face. "I'd love to, sweetie." After lunch, Howard took Thomas into his study, where they talked about practical matters, his parents' estate, the girls' education, future plans. Thomas realized his father, always pragmatic, was trying to show care and make amends for the lost years by focusing on financial arrangements. The girls stayed with Evelyn, who gave them a tour of the house, showing them the places where Claire grew up. When Thomas and Howard joined them an hour later, they found all three in Claire's old room, which Evelyn had left practically untouched for a decade. "Look, Uncle Thomas," Lucy exclaimed, pointing at the walls. "Mom painted here too." Thomas entered and felt a wave of nostalgia. The walls, which their parents had refused to let Claire paint during her teenage years, were covered in delicate murals likely done in her childhood, when her artistic expression was still encouraged, before the pressure for a serious career began. There was a seascape on one wall, a starry sky on another, and fantasy trees with colorful flowers on a third. But what caught Thomas's eye was the painting on the wall behind the bed. 2 crescent moons, one golden and one silver, entwined as if in an embrace. "Mom painted moons on everything," Lily remarked, touching the image reverently. "She said the moon is never really alone, even when it looks like it is. She started that painting when she was 8, Evelyn explained softly. "She was always talented. We should have," her voice broke, "we should have supported her more." Howard, usually stoic, placed an arm around his wife's shoulders. "We all have regrets, Evie. We can't change the past. But we can do better now." The visit Thomas initially planned to be brief stretched well into the afternoon. When they finally left, they carried bags of Claire's photos, some of her childhood books, and a set of old paintbrushes Evelyn had kept. "Come back soon," Evelyn said, hugging her granddaughters tightly. "This is your home too." On the drive back, the twins were excited, sharing impressions of their grandparents, the lunch, and especially the discoveries in Claire's old room. "Grandma said we can stay there when we visit," Lucy said, using grandma for the first time. "In Mom's room." Thomas smiled. "So you like them?" "They're nice," Lily said thoughtfully. "Different from what I imagined? More sad?" "They carry a lot of sadness for losing touch with your mum," Thomas explained. "Sometimes adults make mistakes that are hard to fix." "But they're trying now," Lucy observed. "That's what matters, right?" Thomas nodded, once again impressed by the wisdom that could appear in his niece's seemingly simple remarks. By the time they got home, it was already night. The girls were tired but still somehow restless. "Can we go to the studio before bed?" Lucy asked as they climbed the stairs. "Just for a bit." Thomas hesitated, glancing at the clock. "It's late, sweetheart. You can paint all you want tomorrow." "It's important," Lily insisted, wearing that serious expression she rarely used for requests. "Please." Thomas relented, and soon all three were in the art studio. The soft lights illuminated the now familiar space. To his surprise, the girls didn't head for their usual work tables. They grabbed paints and brushes and went straight to their bedroom. "What are you two up to?" he asked, curious, following them. "A special mural," Lucy explained, "to mark today." In the bedroom, the twins chose the wall between their beds, a spot still blank because they could never decide what to put there. With occasional guidance from Thomas, but mostly following their own vision, they began to paint. Thomas watched, fascinated, as a large golden moon took shape at the center of the wall, almost identical to the one in Claire's room, yet unique. Beneath it, 3 figures formed, one tall in the middle and 2 small on either side, clearly representing Thomas and the twins. "It's like Grandma's painting, but different," Lily said as she worked on the details. "That one had 2 moons. Ours has 1 moon, and the 3 of us." "It's about now," Lucy added, painting tiny stars around the moon, "about who we are." When they finished, it was well past midnight, but none of them felt sleepy. Sitting on the floor, they admired the still damp paint. Surprisingly, Lily took a fine brush and, with her neat handwriting, wrote above the mural, "Now we are a family." Thomas felt tears sting his eyes. He pulled the girls close, one on each side, and the three of them stayed there, gazing at the painting that symbolized their journey. A journey that started with an unexpected visit to a market, a pair of crescent moon earrings, and two pairs of eyes that mirrored Clare's. "Yes," he finally said, kissing the tops of his nieces' heads. "We're a family, now and always." That night, all three beds in the house remained empty. Thomas and the girls fell asleep on the floor of their room, under the soft glow of the real moon shining through the window, while the golden moon on the wall dried slowly, a silent witness to a circle that was finally complete. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.